Hi everyone, yasas que Carlos to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making a Moroccan soup known as Harira soup. So delicious. This zesty soup has lamb, it has veggies. I even put a little bit of pasta in it. You can make it vegetarian or even vegan by leaving the meat out. This soup is full of hearty flavors. It's chunky and it's so comforting and cozy. Perfect for the winter days if you want to warm up to something delicious and nutritious too. Let's get started. So there are a lot of components to this dish, but it's so easy to do if you prepare a little bit ahead of time. You're going to need about 8 to 12 ounces of boneless lamb. I've heard chicken being used for this, even beef, whatever meat you like. Just make sure that it's boneless, clean most of the fat off if you can by just cutting it off. And then you want to cut it into tiny little pieces. There are going to be some chickpeas in here, and a good rule of thumb is to cut this around the same size as the chickpeas are. You can cut it a little bit bigger, obviously it doesn't have to be perfect, but prepare that first. I like to cut the lamb into strips, and this is definitely over 12 ounces. I bought a leg of lamb that was boneless from my supermarket, and I just cut a chunk off. This happens to be about a pound. The more the merrier, if you ask me. I just cut it first into strips, and then I cut it into little bite-sized pieces and set it aside. Then I'm gonna go ahead and finely chop up 2 celery stalks. Usually celery with the leaves on is used because it has more flavor, but this is all I could find, so I'm just gonna finely chop that. Then I have a big bunch of cilantro leaves. You can use cilantro or parsley or even a combination of the two. I know some people aren't huge fans of cilantro, so definitely use parsley if you prefer. Chop that up and set it aside. Just get rid of all the thick stems. Put them in your compost, set that aside, and then go ahead and finely chop a large onion. I have a large Dutch oven that's heating over medium-high heat. I'm just gonna add a couple tablespoons of olive oil to this. You can do butter if you prefer. And then I'm gonna add the lamb pieces to this so they can get a little bit of color. They're gonna cook for about five or 6 minutes, just until they're brown. This adds lots of flavor. If you're making this vegetarian or vegan, just leave the meat out and then just add the onion instead and cook that. Okay, the lamb is looking good. It took a little longer than 5 minutes because the pieces are a little bit bigger than what they should be. We have some small, some big, but it's okay. Okay, now next we're gonna add the onion and cook it for about 7-8 minutes or until it's nice and soft. I also like to add a little pinch of salt over it. Oh my goodness, it smells so good already. Okay, next go ahead and grate 5 or 6 garlic cloves and put them in there just until they warm through. You can add at this point with the garlic, because it takes about the same amount of time, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. This adds really rich flavor, tomato flavor. We're gonna still add some canned tomatoes, but this really deepens the flavor even more. Okay, so the garlic, once it's grated, it just needs a few seconds, maybe 10-15 seconds. And cooking the tomato paste sweetens it some. So next we're gonna toast the spices a little bit. Half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, or you can throw a stick of cinnamon in here. Half a teaspoon of ground turmeric. A 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. You could use fresh or dried. A heaping teaspoon of dried cumin. And I like to add a teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes for heat. If you don't like them, you can leave them out. You can also add a couple tablespoons of harissa paste, some freshly cracked black pepper, about half a teaspoon or a full teaspoon, however much you like. And I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt or to taste. Now, the spices are nicely toasted. Now I'm gonna add everything else into here, or almost everything. The diced celery. I have 1 15-ounce can of chickpeas that are already cooked. I just rinse them and I drain them. I also have a cup of lentils. These are uncooked lentils. I just rinse them really well. I'm gonna drain the water. If you're using fresh chickpeas, you could just soak them overnight in cold water so that way they're nice and soft in the morning. 28 ounces of canned tomatoes. I puree them so that way the sauce is nice and smooth. And then you're gonna need about 8 cups or 2 quarts of water. You can use chicken stock if you want, vegetable broth. I really wouldn't do the vegetable broth unless I'm keeping it vegetarian, because then it leaves too much of a vegetable flavor. I prefer the water or the chicken stock. This is gonna come to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, I'm gonna reduce the heat to a medium and I'm gonna let it cook covered, stirring it every few minutes so that way it doesn't stick or burn for about 45 minutes or until the lentils are nice and soft, the meat is tender and just melting in your mouth. Then we're gonna finish it off with the final ingredients. While this is cooking, I'm just gonna clean up a little bit. Okay, so I ended up adding another cup of water because it dried out a little bit more than I wanted it to. You can keep this at the consistency that you prefer. Now at this point, I have 1 tablespoon of all-purpose flour in here. I'm just gonna add a few tablespoons of warm water to it to dilute it, mix it all up, add it to the soup and give it a quick mix. And then you could add a 1/4 cup or 1/2 cup of, this is vermicelli. You can add orzo if you prefer. If you want to keep this gluten-free, you could leave the flour out and the pasta out and just add a 1/4 to a 1/2 cup of rice to this. It's totally up to you. And now it's just going to cook a little bit longer, maybe about 10-12 minutes or until the pasta is fully cooked and tender. You also want to go in and add your chopped up herbs, whatever you're using. I'm using cilantro. Give it a taste, add a little bit more salt and pepper if it needs it. And then it's going to be ready to serve. The soup is ready. The noodles cooked in about 12 minutes. Again, they're gonna sit in the pot before you serve it for at least 10-15 minutes and they're gonna continue to cook. But 10 to 12 minutes is really all they need, maybe 15 max if you're using rice. Keep in mind that the soup is going to continue to thicken. So you can thin it out to the consistency that you like by adding more broth or more water. It's up to you. I like for it to be thick but still pourable, if that makes any sense. And again, when you warm it, you could always add a little bit more liquid, whatever liquid you prefer. I'm drooling, it smells amazing in here. Time for the taste test. So much flavor. I like to squeeze lots and lots of fresh lemon juice on top. You do get a real big kick of the spice because I added so much crushed red pepper flakes, but it goes so well with that hearty tomato-based sauce. The warm spices in the background are so good. The flour gave it a velvety consistency. It's nice and smooth. So hearty, so delicious. The perfect soup to cozy up to on a cold winter's day. I hope you guys give this recipe a try. Print out the recipe with the exact measurements on the website, dimitrasdishes.com. Thank you guys so much for spending time with me today. If you want to learn how to make a nice French bread to go with this, click over here and I'll see you right over there. Yes, us.